So the takeaway from this slide is that voting and other forms of political participation incur costs but produce benefits. People participate when they can meet the costs and appreciate those benefits. Those with money, education, experience with politics, free time, and self-confidence find it easier to meet those costs, while those with a greater psychological stake in the process or financial stake in the process receive greater benefits. Differences in participation cannot be explained completely by these individual differences in resources and psychological involvement, however. Institutional contexts, things like variation in registration laws, can affect turnout as well, and this is why those voter ID laws become so controversial. Finally, the assorted demographic and institutional influences on voting produce an electorate in which wealthy, educated, older white people are overrepresented, and poor, uneducated, young, and non-white people are underrepresented. People like this are more likely to be mobilized by parties, interest groups, and campaigns. If you're likely to vote, we're going to target you because you're the easiest to mobilize. I get the best return on my money. I have some research showing that's not true, but that's what the current state of the political science literature says. I've been working with a couple different groups to prove that wrong because I find it incredibly problematic. But middle-class white voters are targeted as the cheapest to reach and the easiest to mobilize. This leads to a world where voting becomes a vicious cycle. Those who don't vote don't get targeted in future elections, and those who don't get targeted are less likely to vote. Now that we've discussed turnout, I want to move on to the question of why people vote the way they do. There are three main approaches we're going to talk about. The first is the prospective or responsible party voting model. In this, voters decide what government will do in the near future, hence the title prospective, by choosing one or another responsible party. They examine the two-party platforms, or three or four, think about which one will be better for the future, and then cast a vote for the party that will do better for them. However, there are a couple problems with this approach. In a two-party system, voters may actually be choosing the less unpopular stand rather than the one they prefer. More importantly, this requires the most work by voters. They have to learn about policy and party platforms, have to evaluate the differences between them, and then have to think about which decision will be best for the future. This is a significant hurdle for most voters who don't want to burn a lot of calories on voting, and seems unlikely for many people. Which brings us to the second approach. Approach number 2, the electoral competition voting model, also known as the median voter model. In this case, the two parties act as purely competitive, rational actors trying to gain 51% of the popular vote. If you can gain the median voter and everyone to the left or right of that person, by definition you win the election. Let's now see what this looks like in chart form for the visual learners out there. As you can see, we have what basically looks like a normal distribution, what is popularly known as a bell curve of voters and their political positions ordered from left to right on the spectrum. You have a few voters who are either extreme liberals or conservatives, but most people cluster in the center. I'm going to go over the Liberal Party's movement here, but the same applies to the Conservative Party in this diagram. So at the start of a campaign, we have primary elections where only voters of one party cast votes for a preferred candidate. In this election, the goal is to get the majority of the liberal voters to vote for you, so you search for the median of the Liberal Party, the center of the left party. That turns out to be relatively far to the left, where the party says, we're going to be our most liberal, our most progressive, push things out there. The diagram points us out at Liberal Party at the start of the campaign. Once that's over, it's now time to run in the general election, which is a different set of voters. So to get the median voter there, you have to be closer to the median voter than the Conservative Party candidate is, so you move closer to the center where it says Liberal Party at the end of the campaign. The ultimate prediction here is that both parties will stake out the median position, and this is the mechanism by which we get political accountability. However, we don't see the candidates go completely to the center for a couple of reasons. First, they've already made statements in the primary and will be held to them by their base, so they can't go too far to the center without losing trust of people on the left or right. Second, if liberal candidates moves too far to the right, she will lose the votes of those to the left who will likely stay home. That's problematic for her. Let's call this candidate Hillary Clinton. She moves too far to what the Bernie Sanders voters think is to the right. They stay home, they cost her enough votes that she has to at least potentially think about them, or not and keep those people home. I'll let you all decide what she actually did. I have no opinions on anything because I'm a neutral arbiter of facts. So, we don't get pure convergence, though, to the median voter. We get something pretty close, where the two parties become indistinguishable on any number of issues. One of the problems with this theory is that it implies that voters consider nothing but the issues, and know exactly where each party or candidate stands on these issues. We know that's not the case, as voters consider other things like appearance, whether a candidate seems nice, fun to hang out with, gender, race, height, etc., etc. Second, candidates engage in what's called strategic ambiguity, where they try to avoid being nailed down on individual positions. This creates a wider range of positions that can't be attributed to candidates, making the point estimates far less precise than the chart implies.